Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the 12th Annual Nebraska Manufacturing Summit. My name is Michelle Lutz. I'm an audit partner at RSM. RSM and the Nebraska State Chamber have worked together to host this event for the past several years. We've thoroughly enjoyed working with Brian and his team and couldn't do this without them, so definitely thank them for the organization, the promoting, and all the work you've done. So thank you for that partnership that we have. I would also like to thank my internal RSM team. Emily Carver and Kate Huber have been integral in the technology and the marketing that we've done for this event. So thank you very much for that. As you know, this year we're doing this virtual. So as much as Brian and I would love to be in the room with you, we're trying to keep everyone healthy and safe. And so, next year we will hopefully be able to return to normal. But for this year, we're doing it 4 different days, Monday through Thursday, 9 to 10:30. We have agendas for each day, wonderful speakers. And so we hope that you tune in each day and join us. So with that, I will turn it over to Brian, the president of the Nebraska State Chamber, to kick us off.
Well, welcome everyone, and it's great to be here. And I'm sorry we're not doing this live as Michelle is this year, because this is always such a great event every year. But I think this is going to be fantastic this year, breaking it into the 4 sessions in the mornings. I think it's easy enough for everybody to participate. Looking forward to this morning. With everything going on with COVID, there's probably no more important industry than manufacturing. And so it's a chance to catch up and kind of connect in a way that's probably pretty important right now. So let me first thank our sponsors for today. In addition to RSM, I definitely want to also thank the Nebraska Public Power District, Ash Grove, and Balin for being sponsors of this event. It's really important, and we very, very much appreciate their sponsorship of the event. They're great companies that we get to work with all the time, and very much appreciate all of their support for the Chamber, but also for the state of Nebraska's economic development. So it's a great pleasure today to kick this off with a speaker from the National Association of Manufacturers who I've come to know well, Keith Smith, who is the Senior Vice President of Public Affairs and Mobilization at NAM. I think most everyone's aware that the National Association of Manufacturers is the largest manufacturing association in the United States. The State Chamber is very proud to be associated with NAM. They have been a great support to us over the past several months, particularly in getting out information that's been very helpful to our members. Keith leads the association's advocacy campaigns on issues, and in that capacity, he works with all of the state chambers and state manufacturing associations like ours in making sure that we are sharing content and doing the best job we can do for manufacturers, and he's integral to everything that we do. He also has a employer and labor policy background, which has been very important this year. So we couldn't think of a more appropriate kickoff speaker than to have Keith join us. And we're going to go back and forth a little bit. But Keith, I'm going to turn it over to you up front. We've got a little bit of time here, about 40 minutes. But if you could take just a little bit of time to talk about what you're seeing nationally from manufacturing industries as everyone tries to deal with COVID, and then where is this leading to as we go out? And then I have no doubt at some point we're going to talk politics in the elections here in Washington. You're just stuck having that conversation with us. But kick us off with a little bit of what you're seeing nationally, because you get to see it in all 50 states.
Yeah, and I'd say, to the question of where is this all leading to, I think that has been the question of 2020, is it seems like employers, businesses have been facing several surprises and needing to adapt throughout the last 7 months. But Brian, it is great to be with you, at least virtually, to help celebrate Manufacturing Month. Last week, Governor Ricketts declared Manufacturing Month in Nebraska. And on October 2nd, President Trump had issued a formal proclamation to declare National Manufacturing Day across the United States. In fact, it was the last official action the president took before testing positive for COVID-19. So I appreciate all the work that's underway by so many manufacturers in Nebraska and across the country to be able to open their doors, either physically or what we're seeing for the most part this year, virtually, to be able to welcome that potential next generation of the manufacturing workforce, inspire them and excite them to be able to start to pursue and understand what a promising career in modern manufacturing looks like. It's so vitally important that students, parents, and teachers are able to see the incredible opportunities that exist in our sector. And there are a lot of opportunities, because at last count, we have over 400,000 jobs to fill in manufacturing across the country today. And now by 2028, we'll have about 4.6 million of those jobs to fill. But here's the important stat. 2.4 million of those jobs could go unfilled if we don't bring more people into our industry, and fast. With all the disruption that was created by the pandemic, that need is even more urgent. But we all have an inspiring story to tell, and that had been put on the forefront of the national conversation over the last 7 months. Because manufacturers in Nebraska and across America, we've been doing life-saving, life-sustaining work. Think of everything that manufacturers have had to do throughout the onset of the pandemic, Brian. Shop floors being totally reconfigured, production lines reworked, products being reimagined, work areas retrofitted long before other industries were able to figure out what was needed. Shifts were added to meet urgent needs for food and supplies. Donations were rushed to local and national relief efforts. Prior to the pandemic, America may have taken manufacturers somewhat for granted, but we delivered when it was needed most. We kept the country going. We produced the food. We made the protective gear. We built the ventilators. We're just researching and developing the cures and the therapeutics that are needed now. And we set an example of how to get people back to work and do that safely. So right now, manufacturers in America, we need to keep leading our recovery in hopes to bring about an eventual American renewal. So I'm looking forward to the discussion here today, Brian. I know that there's a lot of questions and topics that we want to cover, and I'm looking forward to hearing the feedback and questions from everybody that's participating with us this morning.
Thanks, Keith. Let's talk a little bit, and in the meantime, for people that have specific questions, go ahead and ask a question in the Q&A section, and we'll get those to Keith or to me. But let me talk just a little bit about Nebraska manufacturing. What you talked about, Keith, nationally reflects also in the state. About 1 out of every 10 jobs in the state of Nebraska is a manufacturing job. Those jobs typically pay nearly $20,000 more on average than non-manufacturing jobs. They're phenomenal career opportunities in Nebraska. And Keith, one of the things we talk about a lot is when we talk to students, they say, well, I want a technology job. I don't want a manufacturing job. But anybody who's gone through any of the manufacturing plants these days, it's becoming more and more of a technology job. And there's great technology careers and all sorts of careers within manufacturing. And so getting that message out is important. So what kinds of things is NAM up to around getting that message to not only students, but to parents?
Well, you often hear from policymakers using some sort of delineation between manufacturing and advanced manufacturing. The way we see it, any manufacturer that was able to survive through the previous Great Recession and be able to weather the storm of the pandemic, by design, you're an advanced manufacturer. And I think what we've seen throughout the pandemic is a new conversation of what manufacturing in America looks like, what's needed. When we talk about the opportunities that exist in manufacturing, we're seeing that manufacturers are looking for creators. Creators are wanted, and that's something that we put at the forefront. we brand a lot of our outreach mechanisms to that next generation under the creators mantra. And when we look at what we're doing, I think throughout this month, we all have a phenomenal opportunity to be able to open our doors and do that outreach to students and teachers, and importantly, parents, to help them see firsthand what a career looks like. And I know this year has become a bit more difficult to do that, but we've been really excited to see a lot of the high-tech virtual experiences that so many manufacturers have been able to offer to do that. That's something that the NAM's workforce partner, the Manufacturing Institute, has been spearheading in conjunction with our strong state partners like the Nebraska Chamber to be able to help get the message out, to be able to do that in ways and in terms that can connect with that next generation, to be able to show, what did it take to be able to repurpose those manufacturing lines, to be able to create face coverings and masks when they were needed most. They needed that creative, innovative brain power that we have here in America that we need to tap into and be able to put to work. And just to put that into perspective, as so much of the national conversation is about the economic challenges that we face. In our most recent quarterly Manufacturers Outlook survey, we were able to see that the second biggest challenge that manufacturers are still facing today is what we call the skills gap crisis. That skills gap to be able to fill the openings and opportunities that currently exist and match that up with the talented workers that will be able to come in with the capabilities to fill those jobs. So it's something that, while Manufacturing Day, Manufacturing Week, Manufacturing Month is great, it's something that really is a turbocharges a broader initiative that we hope spans throughout the year. And we're looking forward to hitting the road at the NAM next year when it's safe to do so, to be able to get that message out through a national Creators Wanted experience, where we'll be able to take a physical display and bring it to students, parents, and teachers to be able to help them see firsthand and to be able to then re-engage with them, to connect them in with programs that are underway in their own community, like the programs being spearheaded by your team, Brian, at the Nebraska Chamber. So it's something that when we look at what's underway with the backdrop of the national election, we see firsthand both candidates for president have put manufacturing at the forefront of their campaigns. That's rejuvenating that new national conversation and helping parents rethink what those career choices may look like for their own children, to be able to look at firsthand what does this look like and be able to provide that information. That's something that we're hoping to empower manufacturers to be able to do and do effectively.
Keith, on that front, Dream It, Do It was originally an NAM invention, and we've had a Dream It, Do It program in the state for a number of years. This new Builders program that you have is exciting. I've seen mock-ups. You're making a very substantial investment in this program when you take it around the country. We're raising our hand right now. When you guys can come to Nebraska, we will. I think it'll be impressive, and I think it'll have an effect. So we're happy to partner on that. Let me talk to you just a little bit about the beginning of the pandemic, and let's take this chronologically a little bit, because I think it then plays out in terms of where we go from here. At the beginning of the pandemic, and I've often said, I'm not going to second guess any of our political leaders or healthcare leaders at the beginning of the pandemic. None of us knew where this was going or how it was going. I would think I was making fearless predictions as the state chamber president that by July or August we'd be starting to get back to normal. And I was about 180% totally wrong on that one. But in the beginning, NAM is a good working partner in Washington, not only in Congress, but you've got great input inside the White House, which is really helpful. I remember the first thing that started with was really this PPE, the protective equipment process, and NAM was really taking the lead out there in terms of identifying manufacturers who could change lines to PPE, and I know that was a White House initiative. You want to talk about that process and what that was like and how successful or not successful you felt that was?
Yeah, and I would say it's still ongoing. We looked at, the Creators Wanted initiative that we had planned to launch in 2020, what we did was we were able to refocus that to really meet the immediate need that we saw firsthand. And we rebranded it Creators Respond, to be able to help connect manufacturers into supply chains to be able to produce the products that were needed most. What we were able to see is manufacturers were much better positioned to be able to handle a lot of the challenges that the pandemic brought compared to other sectors. Manufacturers were really seen as the national leaders of how to keep their facilities safe based on the nature of the work that so many manufacturers do. We were able to work not just with the executive branch and the administration here in Washington, but directly with so many different states and governors that had a critical need at the forefront of the pandemic to be able to have that assurance that we could keep the supply chains rolling. So what we were able to do is we went out to a national audience of manufacturers and asked them who has the current inventories of PPE and other essential products that could be put into that relief lifeline to be able to be dispatched where needed most. Also, who had the ability to be able to produce that, to be able to have an understanding of what that level of need would look like. And then also, who had capabilities to be able to repurpose their lines and to be able to see what would it take from a policy standpoint to help them better position to do that. We saw the Defense Production Act being able to be effectively leveraged to help be able to assist in that transition. But when really looking at what manufacturers were doing, I know that this wasn't a challenge, Brian, that you all had to experience too much in Nebraska, but the delineation of the shutdown orders that had taken place across the country. Well, we had a clear and strong message to all governors in the federal government that all manufacturers were essential because of the intricate nature of the manufacturing supply chains that existed. We saw manufacturers that may have been a textile producer pre-pandemic have the ability to step up and make face coverings. And to be able to understand what the capabilities of each and every manufacturing facility was, we saw that needing to take a broad approach to be able to look at all manufacturers being essential. And I know Nebraska, because of the smart leaders that you have in your state capital and the work that you and your team were doing, you were able to continue manufacturing operations for the most part without many disruptions that we saw in a lot of other states. But we continue to work closely with FEMA, the White House Coronavirus Task Force, to be able to look at what manufacturers continue to need. And that includes the conversation that we're focusing on now with the need to be able to get a vaccine quickly and safely deployed and at speed and on scale to be able to get to that much needed next step. But at the same time, manufacturers of all sectors are helping to work on developing therapeutics that are needed. And this is something that we want to make sure that we're positioned not just for this crisis, but to be better positioned for the next. And that's, Brian, why we developed an American Renewal Action Plan that really looked at 3 distinct phases: relief, recovery, and then a renewal. And that renewal needed to be able to replenish stockpiles on a national basis, to be able to lay out specific manufacturing-driven recommendations for how we can be better positioned for the next pandemic or the next national crisis. We're able to look at the complexity of global supply chains that, yes, we want to make as much of these critical materials here in the United States, but we also don't want to have policies coming out of states and the federal government that may create a bit of disruption for accessing a lot of those inputs that are often globally sourced. And that's something that we're working closely with policymakers on both sides of the aisle to be able to navigate that complicated network. And we expect in states and then in Congress, both in the lame duck and then when the new Congress meets in January of next year, there's going to be a lot of interest to be able to see what do manufacturers need to be strong, successful, and to be self-reliant to be able to meet our nation's critical needs. And that's something that we see as a tremendous opportunity, regardless of the outcome of November, is to be able to channel that energy productively and effectively. And at the forefront of that is to be able to have the skilled talent needed to fill the jobs that power manufacturing across the country. Oh, I think you're muted, Brian.
Sorry. My technology skills were showing there for a minute. Keith, thanks. I had an opportunity this last week to go across the state a little bit and talk to manufacturers, and you're not going to be surprised that workforce continued to be the number one issues, and we've got actually manufacturers in this state who are turning down work simply because they can't find the people to keep the shifts open. But let me go back and bring it back up to there. After sort of the initial surge of the pandemic, the next issue was really trying to deal with how to keep employees safe at a time where there weren't, and you know, I understand everybody was moving fast, but there weren't a lot of detailed guidelines from CDC and OSHA. And employers were having to make decisions that literally had an effect on potentially on people's health. I can remember we were holding conferences here at the state chamber with manufacturers, and we spent 2 days on just temperature taking. What kind of equipment to use, how to bring people in, how to maintain people's privacy, what do you do when you do have, and how do you isolate people, and all of that. And that went on for several months, and I would argue is still going on. In certain areas, we're having some spikes as this continues, and it kind of varies depending on what portion of the state you're in. But that's led to employers having to make a lot of decisions on this stuff without clear federal guidance. I think the constant concern out there, and if I had to list it sort of a number 2 issue for manufacturers, it's potential liability issues with all this uncertainty. They don't get to shut their plant and wait for regulations to come out a year from now. They have to make decisions and do the best for their employees, which they have admirably. And I'd also compliment our medical professionals in this state who several times were very helpful in that process. In Nebraska, I know some states have passed some liability protection in conjunction with CARES Act spending. Some have not. I know the federal government is looking at potentially some liability protection. We generally prefer federal solutions because our manufacturers often are in many, many states. Where do you see this debate on employer liability for COVID matters going?
Well, it's been one of the toughest debates we've seen up on Capitol Hill. And going back to, those early days of the pandemic, Brian, I know that's something that we heard from manufacturers, that they saw the resources that the Nebraska Chamber was able to provide them to be able to figure out the basic elements that they needed to keep their employees safe and to keep their facilities operational. That's really when the Nebraska Chamber and the NAM became indispensable to so many companies to be able to figure out what do we do and how do we need to do it and do it safely. And it took quite a while, to your point, for the CDC to be able to come out with specific recommendations for safe operations within manufacturing facilities. It was something that took us engaging the vice president, the head of the White House Corona Task Force, to engage directly, to be able to jump up and down and flag how vitally important it was. And it took his personal involvement to be able to prioritize that for the CDC, to be able to make sure that there were no disruptions to the supply chain, that manufacturers could continue to keep their operations and their products rolling. Where that brings us to today is the conversation around the need to be able to have those types of common sense protections for employers that have done the right thing, that have kept their employees safe, and that have followed all the available guidelines that have been made available to them. In Capitol Hill, that's something that we've made clear as part of our renewal action plan is one of the biggest things that manufacturers need to be able to go into the recovery period that we're struggling through right now, to be able to go forward with a level of confidence. We're not looking to protect bad actors here. We're looking to really send the message to policymakers of what manufacturers have done and how to make sure that we don't get subjected to costly litigation that we see on the rise and will continue as the months come, based on opportunistic elements that want to potentially seize on the current crisis. What we're making it very clear is to be able to look at what employers that have produced essential goods have done, to be able to step up and charge through the threshold. What we're seeing is a challenge with a bit of a hot potato up on Capitol Hill. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell have made it clear that he wants to see liability protections included in any package that comes through. And the package discussions, which I'm happy to get into in a bit, to give you the latest of where the stalemate's been, that's been a bit of a challenge. It's been something that we've been focusing on and really highlighting with support from the administration, but where we're really seeing progress is out in the states. A lot of the states have realized that, and lacking federal action or something that can be preemptive and national in scale, they need to be able to step up. And I know that that's something that's been a challenge with so many states and the timing of their legislative sessions. Many states have had to go into session to be able to make determinations of how to, utilize and leverage a lot of the resources that came out of the federal government. Other states, they're going to be looking at what priorities they're going to have when they go into their next session early next year. And that's something that we see very much national in scope, that while we continue to face these challenges from Congress, the states aren't sitting idly by, but they're moving forward, they're enacting those protections. And I know that that's been a big priority focus for the Nebraska Chamber, and I know that we're going to be working closely to be able to secure those gains. Where this goes, it's going to be a tough road ahead, but that relief, that confidence is needed now. It's not needed by Congress in a few months. It's to be able to help make sure that we can go into that recovery with a clear set of confidence to be able to look at common sense protections.
Yeah, Keith, I think that's going to ultimately be pretty important. If Congress can make that move, that is probably the most significant thing they can do in the short term. Last week as I was going across the states, the message was we're fairly fortunate, and I hesitate to use that word in a COVID environment, but coming out of the COVID crisis, when we do get there, it appears like Nebraska is going to come out in a much more positive space than maybe even any other state, if you look at our unemployment numbers and our GDP numbers. But that said, when you get behind the numbers a little bit, what you'll see is there's still incredible opportunities in manufacturing, and my sense is manufacturing will lead over the next 2 or 3 years the state out of the recession caused by the pandemic, with potential very significant growth. And also, we've got a question from the audience on this that gets to the point, which is, in order to make that happen, we've got certain sectors of our economy where there's a lot of employee dislocation. Either people have lost their jobs, or even where they haven't lost their jobs, they're working reduced hours because in those industries they just simply can't keep people going at 40 hours a week anymore. And so as we look at it, I'll give you just some rough numbers for Nebraska. We need somewhere between 30 to 50,000 people to fill what we expect will be our economic needs coming out of this pandemic. There's only really two places to find those. Is one, recruit more young people into our educational institutions, community colleges and state colleges and universities, and move those through the curriculum and get them connected and get them out. Clearly, our educational institutions are going to be a partner in that, but that takes a period of years. The most immediate opportunity is truly we have somewhere between 50 and 100,000 of these dislocated employees in the state, and moving people to jobs in manufacturing, which pay more, have better benefits and better hours, is something we could do in the short term. What are you seeing nationally on that front?
Well, I'd say, getting the pulse of where manufacturers are, that quarterly outlook survey that we put out just a few weeks ago was pretty telling. That latest findings showed that 2/3 of manufacturers had a positive outlook for their company in this third quarter, and that was up from just a high of 34% in the second quarter of this year, when we were really battling the throes of the pandemic, and that had been the worst reading from our outlook survey since the Great Recession. So it really put the challenge in stark terms. And the historical average of outlook is around 74%. So while 66% is stronger than it was earlier in this year, it's very short of where we were on average since the inception of this survey tool. And we were able to see a record high, just 3 years ago, 93% optimism among manufacturers. It was a new record that was set. So we've seen a bit of a roller coaster for manufacturers overall. But when looking at where this is going, manufacturers said that they expected revenues to return when asked, when they would expect to see revenues return to pre-pandemic levels, only about 62% expected that they would be able to achieve that in 2021 or later. And that shows the need to be able to have a stronger impetus on recovery support coming out of both state and federal legislators. Now, just about 1 in 5 said that their revenues had already recovered, and about 12% said that they would likely get back to where they were by the end of this year. So we've been through a rough year. Output overall in our sector had plunged 20% between February and April, and that was falling to the lowest level that we've ever seen since June of '97. So even with the rebounds that we've seen starting to come about in the next 4 months, manufacturing production still is 6.7% below the February levels. But because of our commitment and drive that we see within manufacturing, we feel pretty confident that we'll be able to come back from that terrible low, but we've got a long ways to go, and that's why that congressional action is important. From an employment standpoint, manufacturers lost 1.3 million workers between February and April. But with the 5 months of job gains, we're now down to about 647. Our chief economist, Chad Moutre, said that we could potentially add another 300,000 manufacturing jobs nationally by the end of this year. And remember, and this is a point that I can't stress enough, that that's coming at a time when there's 408,000 jobs that are open and currently exist, but are struggling to get filled because of that talent, that skills gap crisis that you mentioned. And again, while the economy is having a slow recovery, what can really help is to be able to have the talent needed to be able to power that recovery. The second biggest challenge that we've seen just behind weak domestic sales overall. And that's one of the things that we've been really highlighting for Congress, is to be able to get the overall economy back and stimulated. That can help foster a greater drive within manufacturing. Over the last 8 months, we've achieved a lot. We've had about 6 wins that were recommendations that we had put forward in our renewal action plan. But, looking at what priorities we've got for congressional action, liability protections, as we discussed at the top of that, additional funding for the Paycheck Protection Program, expansion of the Employee Retention Tax Credit, which was included in the CARES Act, and it helps protect the employer-employee relationship by providing a tax credit for employers who've been able to keep employees employed during the pandemic, as opposed to having to go through furloughs. And importantly, additional resources for testing and vaccine research. So looking at where that's going to go, over the weekend we saw the administration ask Congress to be able to pursue legislation to free up about $130 billion of unused PPP funding, and that's not likely to move forward with the current signals coming out of the House majority and Speaker Pelosi. While there may be a deal that could be reached in the next few days, the ability to take that deal and translate that into legislative action before the lame duck, well, that's something that we think may be a challenge to face. Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell had indicated that he doesn't expect to be able to seriously consider and debate realistic pandemic relief until after the election in that lame duck period. The Senate is going to be focused on the pending Supreme Court nomination that just started today, the hearings of which. So that's going to be dominating a lot of congressional focus, while each member of Congress that's up in November is going to want to be back home and campaigning as much as possible between now and November 3rd. So I know that was a bit of a long answer, Brian, but hoping to get feedback on that and additional perspectives.
Okay, I promise I'm going to get to the presidential election, but I have to admit I'm at that point where I can't stand another commercial. I'm going to ask you one other question before we get there, and that is on the supply chain side. So I know our Nebraska manufacturers are starting to take a very keen interest in creating better connections between our smaller and larger manufacturers in the state, because as they started to focus on the risks of overseas supply chains, it became clear, I think, to a lot of our manufacturers that there are potential component providers and vendors right here if we can just connect our manufacturing industry in Nebraska. Where is this supply chain issue going nationally, and is what we're seeing in Nebraska reflecting what you're seeing nationally?
Well, when looking at the supply chain, it's to your point, we have to be looking at all sectors and manufacturers of all sizes. 90% of NAM members are what we consider small and mid-sized manufacturers, which they're the lifeblood of modern manufacturing today. And those are the manufacturers that were able to step up into the breach and be able to repurpose their lines at the beginning of the pandemic. They showed how adaptive and agile their facilities can be. And that's something that, longer term, we can't lose sight of. And there is renewed interest to be able to look at, for a wide variety of reasons, to be able to explore different sourcing options, to be able to look at supply chain elements that are more domestically based. And we want to be able to see action from Washington to help support that, to be able to have the right liquidity for manufacturers, to be able to beef up their operations here, clarifying loan requirements, be able to help with the recovery packages that can help speed the delivery of that aid. You'd be able to have smart tax and regulatory policies that can help make those sourcing decisions easier. They make it clear that setting up a manufacturing operation in the United States can be the most competitive spot compared to the rest of the world, to be an export platform and to be closer to their customers. And that's something that requires a 21st century infrastructure system, and that's something that both candidates have expressed a lot of interest in being able to pursue if elected president. But that's something that's been a challenge that we've had to struggle through for quite a number of years. We need to go beyond just a focus on an infrastructure. We can actually come into a true strong national investment in a wide range of infrastructure, not just roads and bridges, but broadband and the electrical grid. That's something that we were able to lay out in our recommendations that are included in Competing to Win, specifically Building to Win, that we've been talking to the Biden campaign and Biden transition team and continue to talk to the administration about.
So you gave me the lead in, Keith. So last question, as we look at this election, and I think we've learned not to call these things from past experience. Does the agenda for NAM, does the agenda for manufacturers change significantly based on who wins, and where are the big differences in terms of what our agenda will be? I won't ask you to pick a candidate, but in terms of our agenda, where?
Yeah, and I'm glad you didn't ask me to look into a crystal ball of what's going to happen on November 3rd, because that's not something I'd be comfortable doing. And I think anybody that comes at that question with any level of confidence or certainty is I would question that outlook. But looking at the composition within Congress, Democrats need a net gain of 3 to 4 seats, depending on the presidential outcome, to win control of the Senate. Right now, we're looking at the House. Republicans would need somewhere in the ballpark of around 18 to 20 seats to be able to get control. At the current moment, projections show that Republicans are likely to take a loss in the House, but really the Senate is really increasingly in focus. We see a lot of races that weren't at the forefront before now getting a resurgence in funding. Yeah, in fact, we just saw over the weekend a new record set for Senate campaign fundraising with the Democratic challenger in South Carolina, Lindsey Graham, the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee, who's overseeing the Supreme Court nominations. They netted in $57 million in the third quarter. That is for those that are involved in political operations, that is an astounding number. But looking at the top of the ticket at the president, at the presidency, we look at the second term of Trump continuing on a lot of the themes of the first term. The Republican Party didn't come out with a platform. They came out with a lot of directional goals that the president set on. And that was continuing to strengthen our tax code here in the United States, defending the lowered corporate tax rate that was able to be achieved through the recent tax reform, continuing the regulatory relief and providing clarity to reduce the burden of regulatory compliance, continuing with COVID relief and infrastructure, potentially something in the ballpark of immigration, but that remains to be unseen. But unfortunately, one of the things that we have seen this administration do, which seems a bit counterintuitive in the current dynamic, is to really look at some misguided proposals that hinder the ability for manufacturers, particularly in the medical supply and pharmaceutical space, to be able to continue to remain the world leader in innovation. A lot of the price controls proposals that have been pursued through executive order would actually hinder our ability to engage in that research and development. We saw that with the enactment of an executive order just a few weeks ago and at the end of August that put in place a international pricing index that holds back that global powerhouse that is American manufacturing in the pharmaceutical space. Now, if President Biden has been campaigning on a Build Back Better agenda, which has manufacturing at the forefront, one of the things that he's prioritized is COVID relief, and that's something that we expect to be the dominating focus if Vice President Biden is elected president, to be able to see an economic and healthcare package pursued with Congress early on in his administration. Infrastructure has been a huge focus for the Biden team, and we've been optimistic with the reactions that they've provided to our Building to Win proposal. Immigration has been an issue that the Biden campaign is also interested on, but similar to President Trump, we also see some misguided populist rhetoric in the space of how we lower healthcare costs. We all agree that we need to have healthcare costs reined in the United States, but we need to do that in a way that doesn't sacrifice the free market system. Tax and regulatory changes are also high on the list with President Biden, and that's something that at the NAM, we don't focus on the politics or the personalities. We really look at policy. When we look at some of the policies that we've been able to achieve in the tax space, what that's been able to do to ensure that we can be competitive compared to other markets outside of our borders that have wanted to steal into our mantle of competitiveness. Lowering that corporate tax rate has been incredibly helpful. Increasing it, as we've seen many proposals coming out of the Biden camp, that would really harm our ability to continue this growth trajectory that we need to see.
Keith, I think you mastered that without offending anybody, which makes you a minority of one in this country right now. So
we've got to work with whoever's elected.
Yeah. So thank you for that, and thank you for today. As usual, I have let this go beyond our time slot, and Michelle's never going to give me the mic ever again. But Keith, I really want to say thank you, not only for being here today, but for everything you do for Nebraska manufacturers on a daily basis, and we're very heavily reliant on you and your team, and we really appreciate it. So thank you for being here.
Appreciate the opportunity, Brian.
Well, with that, I think we turn into the next item on the agenda, which is one of our very favorite things every year, which is at this event every year we name our small and large manufacturers of the year awards, and it's always difficult because there's always some great manufacturers. A couple weeks ago, the governor and I had a chance to go around the state and actually visit both of these companies this year, and it was terrific. It is just fun to see what's going on in manufacturing today. And so with that, before we turn to the video of the Small Manufacturer of the Year Award, which is MetalQuest in Hebron, let me just say that from the first time I walked into that place, it challenged me to rethink about manufacturing. It challenged me to rethink about technology. And it certainly challenged me to rethink about the sense that, the age-old sense that somehow technology would create less jobs. It's a case in point that technology creates more jobs, and it's just fun to go see. So I can't do it in words. It's just best to see it. So let's turn to the video presentation for our first award winner this year, MetalQuest.
MetalQuest started in January of 1996 in Deshler, Nebraska.
Moved over to this facility in 1999, and we've added on to the facility twice since moving here. The way we measure and evaluate success is seeing that we're better tomorrow than we are today. That's one of the things that we really strive for, is continuous improvement at MetalQuest.
Success is the teamwork that we have. It's the accomplishments we do, doing things that no one else can to the best of our ability. We win or lose as a team. I mean, everybody knows that. We're the essence of that.
Innovation at MetalQuest is kind of unique because it's really just part of our culture.
When you manufacture a product, you're only as good as your weakest link at any given time. What we do is very precise, and it takes a very, very strong skill set to do it. But at the end of the day, we come together as a team and we succeed as a team.
When we see our people be successful and grow, and when we see our customers be successful and grow, we see us as a company be successful and grow, we know we're doing the right things.
To me, innovation happens daily. When you look around at some of the processes we do, I mean, they're ideas that have started out literally as a concept, and we built upon it. One of our core values is the third idea. And what the third idea means is, if you have an idea and I have an idea, we put those together and we create the third idea. And the third idea is a combination of those two thoughts that hopefully is better than each individual one. It's really hard to define just one thing in terms of a meaningful accomplishment because, again, we're very team-based, and I see individual successes all around us. Projects that I think that, we're really proud of, our segment cell is something that I'm really proud of the team that was able to put that together. I would put that team up against a lot of different companies. That's not easy to have built that. I'm proud of our new Index multi-spindle CNC lathe and its capabilities and what we're going to be doing with that in the future.
It allows us to make parts much quicker than we've ever been able to do before. It's something that exists in the United States, but not very many companies have it. And most of the companies that have it are a captive shop where they have their own product and they make it where us being a contract shop, we don't have our own product line. We only make parts for other people. And we're in a very unique position now where we can start taking on opportunities we've never ever been able to do before.
There's a huge underlying manufacturing backbone in the state of Nebraska that I think needs to be seen more than it is. You look around, whether it be small towns, whether it be cities, they're dotted with manufacturing companies, and a lot of times they're overlooked. Building things that from the average everyday consumer will use to very specialized stuff that that gets sent overseas. There's a lot of manufacturing in the state of Nebraska. On behalf of MetalQuest, I'd like to thank the Chamber, the Governor, and everybody else that was responsible for nominating and giving us this award.
It's nice to have people recognize us for the hard work that we put in.
This is something we are very, very proud of, and I'm really proud of our team for getting us to this level.
Well, on behalf of both the Chamber and RSM, I want to again congratulate MetalQuest for this award, and it's very well deserved. Something important, and I talked about earlier, was I do absolutely believe, and the statistics would demonstrate it, manufacturing is going to lead us out of this recession, and not only in Omaha and Lincoln, but across the state. Now, we've got some workforce challenges to deal with, but manufacturing is going to lead our economic development in communities large and small across the state. And so we couldn't have a more appropriate award winner this year than MetalQuest. In terms of our large manufacturer year award, again, a company that the first time you enter the building, you understand that something's different here. And representative of something also important in Nebraska is that we have many global manufacturing organizations that choose to be in Nebraska. And they're really important to everything we do, both in terms of exchange and technology and manufacturing standards. They are some of our best Nebraskans, and we try to convert them all as they come. Klaas makes, I think as everyone knows, highly technologically advanced agriculture equipment. It's a great company, and they have led the way this year in terms of not only surviving COVID, but thriving in the COVID environment and finding solutions to the day-to-day problems as all our other manufacturers have. I'm very proud to announce that Klaas is our large manufacturer of the year. And again, a video is much better than anything I can say.
Claas is an agricultural equipment manufacturer which was founded over 100 years ago in Hasewinkel, Germany. How do we measure success? Definitely for us what is very important is market share. We're competing with some very big players, so it's very important where do we stand. It's an exciting company. There's so much innovation going on in this company. The company is constantly coming up with a new product. The largest accomplishment was the introduction of the Lexion in the production itself. New product always brings interruptions to a production line. Production line likes to have normal processes, regular processes. A new product is definitely an interruption. We managed that extremely well together with our German colleagues. In addition to that, we have built more combines as we did last year, and we're planning to build more than this year and prior years. So I think we're on the right track to satisfy the market needs.
Innovation occurs on multiple levels of the company. Of course, the products that you see around me, the combine and the tractor. Likewise, in manufacturing processes, we're very innovative, and even the business processes that we use to drive the business. Although Claas is a large global leader in agricultural equipment, it's still small enough that they value the input of each one of their employees. And truly, just like the quote from Helmut Claas, is that there is no secret to our success. It's just that we have good ideas and motivated people. And truly the company promotes ideas from all the folks. Even our suggestion programs, they promote this, they encourage it, and it's perhaps something unique and special about this company that's privately owned.
I think the biggest challenge for us is, just like every other company here in Nebraska, the US, finding skilled labor. So instead of only complaining about it, we started a new program which is based on the German dual educational system. On one hand, covers the theoretical learning curve, going to school, and on the other hand, the apprentice has to work in the company, go through formal training in the company, work on the product. We're starting this this year. We're very excited about it. We're very grateful for this award. We're very thankful. We want to thank the Chamber. Especially we want to thank our employees who contributed and are responsible for this award every day. Especially during these difficult times, they have done a marvelous, outstanding job. I'm extremely proud of this team here. Not only the managers, everybody in this company has done an extremely tremendous job in working through this pandemic, keeping us on plan, being responsible. So thank you to our team, and thank you to the Chamber for this award.
And Michelle, we really enjoyed our time out at Claas when we had the opportunity to present the award. Great fun. For those who don't know, I had a stint in my career where I actually went and opened up an office for a U.S. company in Berlin. And so Matt and I, while we were there, got to exchange Berlin stories and found out that we were actually in Berlin at the same time and somehow didn't connect in different roles for different companies. I do think that this dual education program of having academic learning in connected with on-the-job learning is a model for, and I know there are other companies doing similar things within the state, is going to be a model forward. What we have found in the past is the number one reason that young people pursue a career tends to be experiential. Not even what their parents say or what a teacher or counselor may say, but experiential. And the more we talked, even last week as I was out talking to manufacturers, one of the issues for workforce for the state of Nebraska is, and actually nationally, is there are fewer and fewer young people working jobs between 16 and 18, and the amount of that experiential learning that would have occurred 30 or 40 years ago just isn't the same. And so it's really important that when people are pursuing, whether it's a community college certificate or a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree, that manufacturing is part of the process, not only from an academic side, but from an experiential side. And that's how we're going to get those 10 or 15,000 employees into manufacturing. So again, much credit to Klaus. They're a great contributor to Nebraska, and couldn't be more happy to provide the award to them. And so, Michelle, hopefully you're not as mad at me now because I've got us back on time and we're actually ahead of schedule.
You're doing great.
I'm going to turn it over to you just one second, and then I'll be happy to introduce the governor, who will conclude today's session with a discussion about how we get Nebraska growing coming out of the pandemic. Michelle, I'm going to leave it to you since we've got just a couple minutes here. Any other thoughts in terms of the manufacturers and this process right now?
Yeah, as Brian said, totally enjoyed our time out at class. It's an amazing operation, and we congratulate them for winning the award. I didn't get to go out to Medical Quest with the governor and Brian, but equally as excited for them. So congratulations again on behalf of RSM for winning. So it looks like the governor may be ready.
Yeah, so let me introduce the governor, which is always one of my favorite things to do. And I'll even behave today, Governor. Governor Ricketts has done just an exceptional job during this COVID crisis, and for manufacturing particularly. While other states were, as Keith mentioned, while other states early on in this process were without a lot of information, simply closing a lot of manufacturers down, deeming them non-essential, that turned out to be a very bad strategy for those states, because what we found was the economy is interlinked, and we saw it even in Nebraska. So in the beginning, I can remember when a number of manufacturers had initial supply chain issues. You could see that economic ripple all the way through Lincoln and Omaha in related industries, and see that economic effect come through even the banking and finance industries. Certainly when our food processors had some issues, which they were quick to resolve a lot with the help of UNMC and the governor, you could see that ripple through. And one of the lessons learned from this whole COVID experience is how connected this state is. Not only around a football team, but economically. Throughout this process, I would say that without question, the governor, through his weekly calls, through just an incredible amount of hours and work from he and his team, kept everybody informed, made database decisions, and really put Nebraska in a place to grow and come out of this pandemic, I would argue, better than any other state. And Governor, I don't know. I have to say nice things about you. You've just done a heck of a job on this. But we're all interested, Governor. To this point, Nebraska's done very well. What comes next? And really need to turn the rest of the program over to you today. You've got 30 minutes here to talk about how do you see this going, and in the end, and where we go to get Nebraska going. So, with pleasure, I introduce Governor Ricketts.
That introduction, Brian. I really don't want to talk because all I can do is screw it up from here. You said so many nice things. Hey, are we going to do some questions and answers at the end of this too?
Absolutely, and I absolutely encourage, in fact, this is where I can get back at him, ask really hard questions in the Q&A, and I'll make sure that we get those to the governor. So this is your shot to put a question in the Q&A, and we'll do that as well.
All right, very good. Well, first of all, thank you very much, Brian. I appreciate the kind introduction, and thank you for holding this Manufacturer Summit. Obviously, we've been impacted by the coronavirus here and doing this virtually, and we look forward to being able to get back together again in person down the road. But it is important to continue to celebrate our manufacturers here during Manufacturing Month, so I appreciate you doing this. And, of course, it's really important for our state. Manufacturing is our second biggest industry. It's a little over 11% of our overall state GDP and employs about 100,000 people here in the state of Nebraska. And, of course, these are great paying jobs that pay well above the median income. So what we want to do is continue to foster manufacturing here in our state and help it grow. And that's one of the reasons why we proclaim October Manufacturing Month, and then we continue to celebrate our manufacturers. And certainly during this pandemic, we've seen our manufacturers step up to help address it. Whether it's been Green Plains, who started using their York facility to produce hand sanitizer in conjunction with the University of Nebraska. That has really been a fantastic, they've donated that hand sanitizer to the University of Nebraska, and really, again, have been a big help when we were short on hand sanitizer here in our state. To Bayland, who has found temporary work for furloughed workers to be able to help out, from local manufacturers and so forth. To Becton Dickinson, who's invested millions of dollars and is on track to be able to produce about 50 million syringes to be able to help with the vaccinations as we have that. So we see that our manufacturers continue to step up. And of course, I think one of the reasons why we're so lucky here in Nebraska to have manufacturing is that relative to some other industries, it's not been impacted as much. Obviously, we never went down the road of doing a stay-at-home order here in Nebraska, which means we never had to, and frankly, one of the reasons we didn't do it is because I didn't want to declare certain businesses essential and certain businesses non-essential. I think all businesses are essential. If somebody wants to provide money to you, wants to pay you for providing your service or your product, that's essential to them. And so while we did target certain businesses that were more high risk to temporarily close, we never went down the path of saying this business is essential, that business is not essential, because it's just a false frame of reference for how the world actually works. So anyway, so I wanted to say thanks to all the manufacturers out there for all the great work you've been doing. We really, really appreciate it. And of course, want to say congratulations to Klaas and MetalQuest for being manufacturers of the year as well, right? That's an official thing right now, Brian? We've made that all official?
That is all official. It's all done. And the governor's giving me a hard time because I blew the cover on one of them earlier this month. So he's better at this than I am.
So anyway, so congratulations to both those, and two great companies that we've worked with at the state very closely. Klaas has been involved with our German apprenticeship program, and then also a program in North Omaha to really help expose our middle schoolers to the opportunities of manufacturing. And MetalQuest has been a part of the Developing New Talent Initiative as well to be able to expose those middle schoolers to manufacturing, in their school districts at the Lawrence, Nelson, and Sandy Creek schools. So thanks to both of those companies, and well-deserved rewards on both counts. So what I thought I'd do today, Brian, is maybe just hit upon some of the things we've been doing with regard to the pandemic. And because you said, hey, where do we see this thing going? Right now, Nebraska has fared pretty well relative to maybe other states. I think it's a combination of things. We've had a lot of people here in Nebraska sacrifice early on. We put our directed health measures in place to restrict their gatherings, and we targeted some businesses like salons and tattoo parlors. We limited restaurants of business to have dine-in, and bars the same deal. So we had a lot of people make some sacrifices early on. I think also the fact that we're not connected by direct flights to Europe or China was a big deal because when the president shut off those inflows of that virus, they were more severely impacted than we were, in part because they already had that interaction going forward, but we didn't really have that as much here in the state. We experienced our first positive on March 6th. We also, just have not as much population as other places. And frankly, our folks started taking actions more quickly. I remember quite vividly back in March telling my wife that she and my daughters were not going to go to New York City for spring break, and telling my parents they were not going to go to the Big East championship game because of the pandemic. And yet New York hadn't closed down at that point. In fact, when we had our first case, I remember Mark Shepard in Fremont schools, our first case went to a basketball game on a weekend at the gymnasium there, and he took the step of going to spring break early on March 9th and essentially shutting that school down on March 9th. New York schools didn't close down until March 15th. So I think also some of what we saw here in our state is that we moved more quickly to be able to address some of the things than even places like New York, where they're a little bit slower to take those steps and were seeded with the virus a lot earlier. Here in Nebraska, we've also benefited from the access to UNMC and some of the experts there. And with that, we've crafted our plan for how we're going to address the pandemic. I'm sure many of you have probably seen some of my press conferences. You're probably familiar with it, but I'm going to just kind of cover it again real briefly. The first, it's a 6-pillar plan to support our hospital capacity. The first pillar is around testing. We did a unique public-private partnership where we hired an outside firm from Utah to be able to come in and help us with our testing. That's how we created the Test Nebraska program. That program has over doubled the amount of tests that we've been able to do here in the state of Nebraska. So that's been critical for us to be able to find people who are positive with coronavirus. We are doing, we actually have the capacity now to do anywhere between 7,000 and 10,000 tests a day. Like any growing operation, we have our obstacles to overcome with regard to making sure we've got appropriate staffing at the facility, to make sure that we've got a good process in place to be able to turn around tests in a timely way. So as we have seen, for example, a lot of nursing homes turn in a lot of tests at once, our system is bogged down and we've got to manage our way through that. But it's a management problem that you all have faced. Apply the same processes that you do to be able to address that. So we're working to make sure Test Nebraska turns around those tests in a timely manner. And then we also reach out to those other folks who are providing testing and make sure they're turning it around in a timely manner. Our goal is 3 days, but we really want to cut that down to 2 days if we can, because the shorter time you find somebody who tests positive, you can get them to isolate and then make sure they're not infecting anybody else. The second pillar is contact tracing. And this is where our public health departments are the primary line of defense, and they've got about 218 people hired at the local level. And then we are hiring up to 1,000 people at the state level to supplement that. And testing and contact tracing is the blocking and tackling of how you manage the pandemic. You find the people who are positive, you reach out to them, tell them to stay home so they don't infect anybody else, and then you reach out to their contacts to find out who's had a close contact and get those people to quarantine so they don't potentially infect anybody else either. You have them stay at home to see if they develop symptoms, make sure they're, go get a test or whatever, but we don't want them infecting anybody else either. So those are two key things where we put a lot of resources to really beef up our capacity here in Nebraska. The third aspect of that is PPE, personal protective equipment. We've used the power of the state to go out and buy it and then distribute it through our local public health departments to first responders, healthcare workers, long-term care facilities, dentist's office. Again, people in that healthcare industry or people interfacing with people who may have coronavirus to be able to help keep them safe. The state has spent over $36 million on PPE. Leveraging our buying power, we've been able to get it when others have not. The fourth is having a program to allow people to quarantine if they can't do that safely at home. So we've got our Nebraska Accommodation Project, and we've been able to provide that for our first responders, for our healthcare workers, for our food processing workers, and now for our teachers, so that they can find a safe place to go. If they don't want to go home and worry about either taking the virus back there or picking it up at home, they get another safe place where they can go where they're not going to have to worry about getting exposed or exposing people at home. So we allow for that. Then the next part of the program is making sure that we have special plans in place for our at-risk communities. And this is where, again, we've worked with our food processors. University of Nebraska put together their COVID-19 meat processing handbook. We worked with them when they were having outbreaks to put in best practices and weekly calls with all our food processors, where I was on that call to encourage them to adapt these weekly processes. UNMC was on that call to really make sure that we could get this under control, and we did. We also do it for long-term care facilities. In fact, they've all had to submit their plans for how they're doing it. We've given them guidelines, phases for when they can start bringing people back in to visit, testing to be able to make sure that regular testing to make sure that we're catching any cases, and putting plans in place for those communities that may be more at risk. And those are generally going to be where you've got close contact. Congregate living is a great example of that. A manufacturing environment is an example of that. And you all know because you've taken those same steps. You put in masking policies. You put in temperature checking policies. You've addressed your air handling. Those are all the sorts of things that we take steps to be able to make sure that we reduce the spread of virus at the workplace. And then, of course, educating people at home as well about that. And that's when I was doing, for a while, twice a week Spanish language broadcasts to be able to reach out to the Spanish-speaking community about what they needed to do to be able to not only keep themselves from spreading the virus at work, but also doing it at home. So special plans in place, and we continue to work those special plans. And then finally, our directed health measures. very restrictive at first, gradually have loosened those up. We're now in phase 4 of our directed health measures. And this is where most of our rules are now in guidance. So we're allowing people to be able to make some of the more judgments. We do still limit, for example, indoor venues to 75% of capacity. But really, this is kind of our mode where we're going to be until we get to the point where we've got the pandemic pretty much on the way out because of a vaccine. So we can expect that we're going to be in this phase 4 for a while. But that means we still need to continue to wear a mask when we go to the store, or we're going to be inside a poorly ventilated place closer than 6 feet from somebody. If you can be farther than 6 feet, you don't need to wear a mask. But if you're closer than 6 feet, you need to wear a mask. Wash your hands often. Try and when you're out in public, keep that 6 foot of distance from other people. And here is where what we've seen is over the course of the last several weeks or last couple months is we have seen more cases. Now we're doing more testing, a lot more testing. We've had almost 20,000 tests returned one day last week. But we also are seeing more cases. And part of it is we just got to continue to remind people, folks, the virus is still with us. I know everybody's tired of this. We had one of my public health directors say, people are over COVID. I get it. People are tired, but we still got to continue to be vigilant about, hey, we got to keep our masks on when we're going to be in that close contact. Got to remember, somebody you know can give you the virus, right? So don't take it for granted that if just because you're, in a small group in an enclosed area with your family, you could get it from them, or if somebody is a close friend. So we got to continue to remind people of that. And what we see is we're looking for some of the patterns where the virus has been spreading through our contact tracing. And right now, we have some incidents where we had a wedding where we had 200 people attend and 30 people got it. That's a great example of a family gathering where you can still get it. We had 4 retirees who went to coffee, and they ended up, they all got it, and they ended up spreading it to 12 other people and causing some kids to quarantine. So, again, we still do have to remain vigilant about this, but it's really an education process because this is for the long haul. We're going to be doing this for a while. Because if you think about it, how do pandemics end? Well, they end when when the population gets enough antibodies that the virus can't easily spread. And you get the antibodies by either getting, let me turn my phone off. You get the antibodies when you are infected with the virus, right? Or you get a vaccine. And so the federal government is working to get a vaccine very quickly, and we are supposed to have our plans by November 1st. But you can imagine that once we get a vaccine, it's still going to take time to get millions of Americans vaccinated. If you think about our state where we've got a little over 50,000 people who have had the virus out of a state of 1.934 million, we got to get a lot of people vaccinated to get to the point where you got 40 or 50% of the people who have been vaccinated, where that's really when the virus can't spread anymore. At least that's what we suspect right now. So there's still a lot we don't know about this virus, but we can expect that we're going to continue to manage this for the next several months, and so we got to continue to remain vigilant. And then finally, all this is about we put managing our hospital capacity. Just one more thing on the vaccines. There is hope, right? We got 4 vaccines in phase 3 trials, so very excited about the opportunity, perhaps by the end of the year, to start getting people vaccinated. Of course, that'll start with our first responders, healthcare workers, long-term care workers. Those will be the folks that get the priority vaccinations. But once we start doing that, that will really help us put us on the road to be able to put this pandemic behind us. Now, all of this, all the things we've done, all the DHMs and all the testing and contact tracing, all that has been around being able to make sure we preserve our hospital capacity. And we have done that very successfully here in the state of Nebraska. We have been able to provide a hospital bed, an ICU bed, or a ventilator to anybody who's needed it when they've needed it. And that's been key to be able to make sure that we be able to provide that acute health care for folks. So we are seeing right now about 300 people in the hospital, which is the highest we've seen since the pandemic began. But we also know a lot more about this virus we did than back in May when we had our previous high. And that's one of the things, for example, we've seen is that hospitalization stays in March were about 20 days or more. Now they're down to about 4 days. So people are staying in the hospital less. Way fewer people are going on ventilators. In fact, even though we've got 300 hospitalizations, we're not using probably but half the number of ventilators we were back in May. So we've still got really robust hospital capacity. We've got about 28% of our hospital beds are available. About 22% of our ICU beds are available. and about 75% or 78% of our ventilators are available. So still robust hospital capacity. Now that means we still got to manage it, and that's what we're doing. We're working with the chief medical officers of the major hospital systems. We're going to be providing resources to them to be able to help manage this. Stay tuned for more official announcements with regard to that. But we've been working with them. Dr. Antone, my chief medical officer, has been in contact with them daily. We're working on plans for how we're going to handle the increased hospitalizations. And also just put it in perspective, at 300 hospitalizations, we're talking about 7.5% of the overall hospital capacity in the state. So it's still, we've got lots of hospital capacity left in the state. So when you see that we've got lots of beds full, it's not COVID patients, it's other types of patients. So we just need to keep that all in mind. We've got better treatments. We've got drugs like remdesivir. We've got other steroids that help with the inflammation and so forth. So we just, it's something we have to continue to manage, and we'll be continuing to manage, for the next several months until we get to the point where we've got the vaccine widely distributed. And here in Nebraska, I think we've struck that balance between slowing the providing, keep preserving our hospital capacity, and also allowing people to go back to a more normal life. Nebraska has the lowest unemployment rate in the country at 4%. But we also are in the bottom quartile of deaths per 100,000. We're actually ranked number 12, tied with Kansas. So we have struck that balance between slowing the spread of the virus and making sure that we're preserving our hospital capacity and letting people go back to a more normal life. Because, again, getting back to what I'm hearing from my public health departments, people are tired of this. So we really have to be able to find that balance to keep people engaged, so they continue to wear masks when they go to the store. They don't just throw that stuff away entirely. And understand we're doing this for the long haul. Now, as we kind of wrap up here, one of the things we had in this legislative session was probably the most successful legislative session we've had since I've been governor. Kind of ironic, we were in the middle of the pandemic. The legislative session got interrupted, but we were able to get past 1107, which provided for additional $375 million in property tax relief, which you put that on top of the $275 million in there, takes us up to, when fully phased in, $650 million in property tax relief. Put that in perspective, if you're a homeowner in Lancaster County, that's about a 17% break on your house. So significant step forward in property tax relief. But wait, there's more. We also passed and updated our incentive program, which was very important, and you all had a big hand in making sure that happened and also giving us feedback to make sure that new Nebraska Imagine Act will be something that helps us continue to grow and be competitive for attracting that business going forward. Has money for the state's commitment for the next project for UNMC. But we also got veterans tax relief, which is a great deal to be able to make sure we hold on to our veterans here in the state. We were able to pass the college or the career scholarship program, which will allow our institutions of higher education to be able to provide those scholarships to our young people and train the next generation of leaders here in our state. So that's a big deal. And then, of course, and that goes on top of all the things we're doing with regard to the Developing Youth Talent Initiative, targeting those middle schoolers, what we're doing with career academies here in our state, our youth registered apprenticeship program and our registered apprenticeship program through the state of Nebraska. All that fits together nicely to create that talent pipeline so that you'll have the folks that you need to continue to be able to hire and grow here in our state. That career scholarship program was really kind of completing out the rest of the, complete a next step in that pipeline to be able to make sure we can take that young person from that middle schooler, getting them interested in manufacturing through their secondary and post-secondary education so that they come out on the other end ready for you to hire. So we've got more work along the lines to be able to kind of finish that out. But that was a great step forward as well. And then, of course, on top of that, we passed pandemic relief, flood relief, tunnel relief for the collapse of the tunnel that we had in Wyoming that irrigated about 50,000 acres in western Nebraska. So a lot of big things that got done in this legislative session, which will help our state continue to be competitive going forward. And, of course, last year we had the third most per capita economic development projects. Obviously, the pandemic is going to disrupt things with regard to 2020, and we'll have to wait and see how that all turns out. But I expect that Nebraska will be well positioned to continue to grow. All the things are there for us to be able to do that. We continue to work on making sure that we kind of friendly state where we're developing our people. Again, developing our folks is going to be the key, that workforce development, but also cutting that regulatory red tape. We've done that. We continue to do that here in the state. We continue to be easy to do business with. We've re-upped our incentive program. We've got to continue to work on some of the issues with regard to tax relief, but we made a big step forward on that with 1107. And all these things will work together to make us the place where people want to continue to invest and hopefully recapture some of those governor cups that we had the previous 3 years prior to 2019. So now, Brian, I just did a lot of talking all at once. People are getting a little tired of that right now, so maybe let's make it a little more interactive and get questions and talk about some of the stuff that people want to dig in more detail.
Let's do it. And if we could have some folks just in your Q&A section, ask any question you would like to the governor, and please make it difficult. In the meantime, Governor, you know, when we were out at Metal Quest, which was a great trip, but you and I were having tacos at a place called Three Compadres, if I remember right. And
Tres Compadres.
And we were talking about this need to not only continue to get our students within the state connected to manufacturing, but to continue to attract manufacturers and employees from outside the state. How do you see Nebraska's, coming out of this pandemic, Nebraska's ability to attract both companies and people to the state in greater numbers?
Well, so I think we're already seeing anecdotal evidence of it. I have talked to a number of people who told me that their friends or relatives are moving back to Nebraska from places like Denver or Chicago or New York or the West Coast, because this is really anecdotal, intangible kind of stuff. But just talking to people who have been in Chicago, who've been in the East Coast, who've been in the West Coast, it's a much different atmosphere there. People are very depressed. They got a bad attitude. I mean, they're down. They feel bad. One person told me that on the West Coast, they're walking around like zombies. And I think that it's just because it's been handled differently in those places, people just are almost shell-shocked, maybe. And so I think that you're seeing is people are saying, hey, I'm tired of this. I'm going to go someplace where I can have more opportunity to actually live my life. And I think that the quality of life we have here in Nebraska is what's drawing those folks. I think when you're talking about manufacturers who are looking and saying, hey, I mean, Nebraska didn't close down. I didn't have to shut my facility. Let's take food processing as an example. Even when we had a lot of cases in food processing, we were able to handle it by managing through it, working collaboratively with the community on solutions to be able to address the problems we had, working collaboratively with the manufacturers on the issues that they had. You know, for example, UNMC did about 14 site visits to food processing plants to be able to help them specifically. Okay, you need to change this air handler, or, you know, the masking policy you have here isn't being enforced. You need to do that. And some, you know, food processors put up cameras with managers watching to make sure people are wearing their masks. They said, hey, you know, your temperature checking needs to be addressed here. Your PPE needs to be donned and doffed here. So we got a lot of great cooperation to be able to address those issues, but we never told anybody they had to shut down. And of course, that was key for our food supply chain. And I think other manufacturers will take a look at, other companies just in general, and take a look at Nebraska and say, you know what, if I want to get away from the risks that I've got in big cities, for whether it's pandemics or riots or things like that, I want to have my operations in a place like Nebraska where they've got common sense, where they try to approach things in a collaborative way and not use the big heavy hand of government to tell people what to do. So I think that that's going to be a huge advantage for us. And I'll tell you, I have talked to companies already. One company from Chicago, it's a fifth-generation family-owned business. The CEO is not keen on this because it's a tough decision for him and his family. But he's just like, hey, I don't want to stay in Chicago anymore just because of all the things that have been going on. So we're one of the states where we're looking at relocating to. Now, doesn't mean that there aren't other states that are also doing well. You know, if you look at the Midwest generally, I think there's a lot of states that have made the right decisions along with Nebraska. So we're still going to have to go out and compete for that business. But I think we're going to be well positioned to be able to attract a lot of that as we work our way through this pandemic. Companies are going to be reevaluating what they're going to be wanting to look like going forward, and places like Nebraska are going to be very attractive.
Hey, Governor, just a couple comments too. I think they got a lot of support early, but our healthcare providers and first responders have been at this since March, I get the sense, and just would be interested in your thoughts, is our healthcare system a competitive advantage in the state? I mean, they really have been remarkable.
Yeah, I would say that it is. Obviously, we've got great resources at UNMC, and it just, look, obviously, we were able to get experts brief us early on to help us craft our strategy around preserving our hospital capacity. I think that was a key decision for us that helped separate us from a lot of other states who got caught up in changing, goalposts around cases and positivity rates and all that sort of stuff. We never got caught up in that kind of thing. We stayed focused on our North Star, which was hospital capacity. And that's what we're going to continue to manage. And we did that with the help of, the experts at UNMC. Also, things like when UNMC helped us with the food processing facilities, that COVID-19 meat processor handbook was distributed to other states. We were a leader in being able to help other food processing plants in other states do that. When you look at our long-term care facility here in Nebraska, facilities here in Nebraska, we got about 500 nursing homes and assisted living facilities. While we've had a number of deaths, and that's where actually over about 40% of our deaths have been in, it's been very high there relative to the rest of the state because those populations are more at risk. We've had over 200 people die there. But if you compare that to New Jersey, where over 6,600 people have died in those facilities, New Jersey is a bigger state by population by about 4 times us, not 38 times. So, so you can see that we were able to manage our system here better. And in part, that's because the state had a grant from the CDC, and we worked with UNMC on our ICAP program, which is our Infection Control and Assessment Promotion Program, which we've had for 4 years, teaching long-term care facilities how to prevent the spread of infection, not specifically COVID, but all infections. And I think that helped us tremendously that we had that resource here in Nebraska to be able to create that ICAP program so that for the past 4 years, we could train long-term care facilities how to slow down infections. And I think that paid huge dividends for us. So again, that goes back to our healthcare system being a huge competitive advantage. And then CHI is where we've set up our Test Nebraska lab. Again, huge advantage that we had the resources there at CHI. And of course, that being a statewide hospital system to be able to help with the testing, but also manage the hospital cases.
So, Governor, one last question from the audience, and I've got to use a prop, and I'm sorry. So last week I was out in my home country of Scottsbluff Gearing and toured my old high school, Gearing High School, and saw their new career academy, and I got this for a face mask, so I'll be wearing this proudly all week, the vaunted Gearing Bulldogs. But it really was incredible, and the question from the audience is how do we get students to really understand that there's all sorts of careers in manufacturing, and it's not sort of what you would think it is, and it's technology, there's HR, there's accounting, there's executive managerial, all of these things, along with manufacturers who are absolutely willing in most cases to help people along their career path.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you look at the research, what you'll see is when a young person is making that career decision, that the biggest influences are family and friends, but right after that is experiences. And that's why we're trying to really create this talent pipeline with the Developing Youth Talent Initiative, where we start off, with these grant programs where schools and companies work together to create programs in 7th and 8th grade, catch those middle schoolers, so that they start getting experience with manufacturing. And then they can be inspired to take that into a career academy. And I'm glad you mentioned Scottsbluff, because that is a great example of a career academy that everybody in high school has to take. Sometimes we hear that there's a stigma attached to manufacturing, like, and I'll tell you, Scott Volk, who we were with down at MetalQuest, was one of the people who experienced that. He graduated at the top of his class in Norfolk High School. And he said he was going to go to community college and go to manufacturing. And his teachers were like, why are you doing that? You're a smart kid. You should go to college. But see, that's the kind of attitude we got to change. We got to say, no, manufacturing is a great career. Now, fortunately, Scott had a supportive family, didn't listen to his teachers or his guidance counselors in high school, and, went down the path of pursuing a manufacturing career. And now he's got, just a great career with MetalQuest. But we got to get those young people to get that experience of working with manufacturing, to see what those jobs are like. That's why those career academies, where at Scottsbluff High School, where everybody goes through it, everybody's got to take 2 career paths, and that way everybody does it. There's no stigma attached. People get a chance to see all those different career opportunities, and then they can pursue that in their post-secondary education. And it doesn't have to be that 4-year degree. It can be a 2-year degree, which is a great way, even if you want to pursue a 4-year degree, to start without getting a lot of debt and start getting into the workforce. And this is where, again, we really try to promote our youth registered apprenticeship programs and our registered apprenticeship programs so people can earn while they learn. So I think it really gets to all of us have to be focused on changing the hearts and minds of people about how to look at manufacturing, including the parents. And that's where industry, again, just has to get involved with our school districts and provide those type of experiential opportunities so that young people can see that. When you start talking about some of the cool stuff, like when Metal Quest brings out those kids from Lawrence Nelson and Sandy Hook schools to be able to see that they got these robots that are way cool. We saw, Brian, we saw those when we were out there. That's cool stuff, right? I think kids get excited about that sort of thing. So it's about helping our young people see that there are these cool high-tech opportunities to be able to get involved with. That if you want to, you get involved with some of our manufacturers, like Royal Engineering Composites and Minden. They're making literally space-age stuff, right? I mean, this is cool, high-tech, Defense Department kind of materials that they're working with. So, or I mentioned BD earlier. If you want to get involved in the healthcare field, the cool kind of stuff they're doing. So I think just is really incumbent upon all of us to continue to talk about how these are great careers, and then find the opportunities to be able to make sure young people can experience it so that they want to pursue it in their post-secondary education.
Well, Governor, we've reached our time, and one thing I've learned about manufacturers is they like to be on time. I want to thank you not only for being here today, but for your leadership, and particularly these last 2 years. You've now navigated a once-in-a-century set of floods. You've now navigated a once-in-a-century pandemic. So I'm going to wish you 2 more years of peace and quiet in 2021 and 2022. I hope things return to normal.
Yeah, let's hope we don't have a plague of locusts next year. That would be
no. But we really appreciate your leadership. We really appreciate your support for manufacturing, and so thank you for being here today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on. Everybody, and again, thank you to all the manufacturers. Again, congratulations to Metal Quest and Kloss.
Perfect. And Michelle, before we leave, I just want to remind everybody of tomorrow's schedule. Again, same time start, 9 o'clock. We'll cut it off at 10:30 again tomorrow. But a couple things. We're going to go very high level and then very low level tomorrow on subjects we talked about today. We're going to have a national economist here tomorrow. That's always a highlight of the conference because it gives us a bigger global picture. And then we're going to jump into an education partnership session with real manufacturers and educators, including President of the University Ted Carter and Marguerite Himmelberg from Southeast Community College, and a couple of manufacturers to really talk about what's working and what's not working in terms of educational partnerships. And you're not going to want to miss that. So I hope I'll see everybody here tomorrow again at 9 o'clock. Michelle, I will give you the last word.
Thanks again for joining. Like Brian said, great day tomorrow. So please tune in at 9 again tomorrow morning. Thanks.